best we could do. Alright, welcome everyone to our Final Fantasy Retrospective, courtesy of the Attack of Opportunity. I have my two co-hosts here. Over to my left, Mr. Stephen Farrell, my tech director here, as well as Eric Lane, our resident expert, good friend of ours. He might be doing something more with the site a little bit later. Who knows? So what we're going to talk about today is a little bit about mine and Steve's favorite video game series here. A little bit of something from Final Fantasy.
Oh yeah, because it's not one of my favorites.
Nope, not at all, man. What are you talking about?
Yeah,
okay,
I'm
sorry. Me and Steve were always talking about it on the site, so I always lump him in. But yeah, Eric here too. But we're just going to talk a little bit more about the history of, as well as some of the technological aspects of the series over the past, what, 25, 26 years now?
Oh, what is it, 87? Well, yeah, so about 25 years, I believe now.
It's about 25 to 30 years. Give or take. So we're going to begin with the original Final Fantasy, beginning on the NES. Steve, do you want to take it from here? But yeah, 13 and the reason why I go into that, Eric here mentions a loot. God damn it, that was the most important loot they could ever receive.
What are you talking about? You never knew what to do with the fucking thing. Oh, by the way, I guess I should throw this in here now. There's a language warning too. If you're offended by that, you should leave as well.
If they've seen any of our videos before, they already know that. But
oh, good. I don't have to watch my language.
I'm gonna watch it anyway. I mean,
yeah.
Gotcha.
But yeah, the comment on the loot there. For those of you that haven't played the original Final Fantasy, for rescuing Princess Sarah, you receive a loot and a bridge. That's all. Okay. You receive a loot and a bridge. And the bridge, yeah, okay, you get to go to the next continent, get yourself a ship.
No, it's just over a river.
What are you talking about? That's the end of the game.
Shut up.
No, I don't want to go. Game over.
Oh. But yeah, and then the loot, well, you don't even know what that is until you reach the final dungeon in the fucking game. And then open the door with a loot.
Yep.
Okay, so before I get into a little history of this, tell me, how the hell are you supposed to know to use it? I played through the game.
You open the door, it happens.
Cool. You go to the place where you're supposed to, at the very end there, right before the final dungeon, and what do you do? Well, they don't tell you.
Can you get rid of it? Can you like throw it away?
No, you can't.
No.
It's a key item.
Well, that's, I forgot what game it was, but there's some game. Oh, it was that Robin Hood one. It was like stuff you needed.
Yeah.
But it didn't differentiate what it was. It didn't tell you what it was, and you could throw it away. If you didn't have it, you were straight up fucked.
Yeah. With this game, the loot actually, when you go to open the door, the warriors of light just randomly start playing the loot.
They know. We don't know.
And that's how it was back then, and goddamn, we enjoyed it.
Yeah. So with that in mind, I'll give the floor to Steve here. He's our resident historian with this one here.
Alright.
A little bit of history here.
Historian?
He knows this game like the back of his fucking hand.
A little bit, yes.
You just go a little physical compulsive or whatever.
You know, just a little bit. I've done a little research. And what
may or may not
by research, I mean, the year is now 1987. There is a company based in Japan, Square, which is actually being run with Miyamoto's out of his father's power company because video games in the late 80s with that in the whole market, hey, it was just still coming up, being brand new and whatnot. Square did have a couple of previous releases that kind of hit okay. Like, what was the big one? 3D World Runner.
Never heard of.
Exactly. The earlier NES. Unfortunately, it's not enough of a hit, and well,
It was a way of each.
And so they had to go with one last project, or else Square would have to close its stores and be disbanded, and they would, the small company that it is, of all of 13 people, I think, at that time, would have to be disbanded and go on to other projects. However, another small company, named Enix at the time, which I believe you'll be somewhat familiar with,
Yes.
did have a recent success with the role-playing game of Dragon Warrior. I mean, the thing had to sell at least 500,000 copies in just 2 years' time, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know when that was released. We're talking Final Fantasy, not Dragon Warrior.
You may or may not have studied that entire series in its entirety as well.
But that's for a later video, possibly.
Yeah, that's his video.
But no, this is Final Fantasy. So they figure, hey, why not go with one last big shebang? Put everything that we have left into this project and just see what comes of it. Final Fantasy. If it wasn't going to work, it was going to be their final production before the doors shut. Well, I'm sure we can all guess how well that ended up working out in the end.
Mediocre.
Actually, you're right.
Young and non-believer.
But it was just enough to get to go.
I was right.
One good thing about this, though, is they did take a lot of elements, some of you might be able to see, from some tabletop RPGs, things of that nature.
Yeah, at the time when Dungeons and Dragons, I believe the idea at that
Took
point was
from Norse mythology, which took from God knows.
Oh yeah, I understand that, but you know, they borrowed a few classes, features that you can see in most fantasy settings, and built a game around it. You got your typical fighter, monk, rogue.
Oh, your typical fighter.
It was fighter, monk,
Fighter, thief, red mage, white mage, and black mage. Can you guess what class does what?
the monk cast.
Yes! And the man a cookie.
What is it problematic?
No.
Anyways, moving on.
Not bad for some people, huh?
Not bad at all.
Yeah.
7 staff members within Square that was referred to then as the quote-unquote A team. Of course, all contributed. I mean, of course, you got the main planner, Hironobu Sakaguchi. Probably the biggest names go onto the Final Fantasy label.
Why?
As many read, planner and designer. His concept for Final Fantasy involved a large world map to explore and an engaging story, which they were able to pull off enough. The story can kind of drive you through. It's kind of like they kind of copied Dragon Warrior to the letter with that sentence, and you had no idea where the fuck you're supposed to go. So explore!
But this is...
But, no, actually, that's what you're supposed to... Once again, that's what you had to do back then, and god damn it, we enjoyed it.
Well, yeah, and then you get kids nowadays, you put that game in front of them and it's, where's the little bubble telling you where to go? So,
They do tell you where to go in the beginning, actually. Like, go to the northeast.
they did tell you.
The only game from the only
Some idea. It was very
They
vague.
tell you this.
It wasn't until 6 and 7 that they really got into telling you, okay, go here.
Well, again, and back then, that was the whole point. They had to prolong games anyway, so the whole fact that you
Back then,
hours
pretty much all you could
explore
play the game anyway.
Yeah, explore the game, find out where you gotta go, random encounters. So there you go, I had 20 hours to...
Very small cartridge space, so they can't put too much in.
Yeah, replayability wasn't that big of a deal back then. The idea of replaying a game for anything besides your own passion for it wasn't a concept. There wasn't a second level or another mode.
Unfortunately, with 6 classes, you go through once. Hey, let's see what other party we can take through.
Hey, let's see if we can do something with nothing but white mages.
Old mages, that'll never work.
I think it was just one white mage. I see that too.
Yeah.
I've seen a solo thief. People get crazy with this crap.
And what's worse, I've seen someone do it without the level,
The level
the class
change.
the class change. Just because they find out that the monk is actually stronger prior to the class change.
All the technical information and how it's programmed. Are you gonna blame the one guy who programmed the whole cards?
Yes.
For the entire classic series of the first 3 games?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, yes, you can't blame him, but still.
I'll put a little more meaning for me.
So, yeah.
Hey, I mean, come on, one guy, Nasir Gavelli, who was actually just an Iranian American freelance programmer that just happened to be living in Japan at the time that was hired on.
Alright, so I'm just trying to think here. What else are we looking? Apparently this was...
So why did the game appeal to so many people? Well,
sadness.
So many people, well, actually not really that many. There's only about 400,000 copies sold
The first game, yes.
for the first game.
What we're going to get into later is the reason for that massive explosion in exposure and fame. When we start talking about the biggest blade on the face of this series, Final Fantasy VII.
Oh,
come on.
They suck more.
And I'm glad we have
You know what?
that many people. We get that part out.
We'll get to that in a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Moving on.
So yeah, once again, you've got your typical
Your typical setup, a regular Nintendo cartridge, which may have held about half of a 3.5-inch floppy disk
pretty much.
for a home computer.
And then one of my favorite additions, simple story, 4 warriors each carrying a crystal.
Or.
Or crystal.
Bingo.
Depends on which version you're playing.
Cocaine, a ball,
Go fuck yourself.
Light bulb.
MacGuffin.
Okay.
Sure, let's go with that. Oh my God.
Born with Destiny.
Indeed.
Would have been 47 times. It's fine. Not even broke it's fine.
All right, glad you got it.
Let's go.
So yeah, typical setup, 4 crystals, you have to light all 4 of them at one of 4 shrines, destroy one of each of the 4 fiends, yada yada, kill the eternal darkness, game over. Simple.
Huzzah.
I mean, hey, it works. RPGs were still a new branch at that point.
One of the biggest draws to this game, as we said before, the
4
exploration.
people in a party?
And of course the exploration of the map.
Yes.
Because I believe Dragon Warrior had, what, 1 party member?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One-on-one battles through and through.
Granted, the second one you get 3.
That one was fun.
Again, different review.
Yeah, true.
Railroad.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
But yeah.
So don't get the other big name that also came attached to this, other than Sakaguchi for main lead, and it would actually remain the main leader and planner for the series up to, oh Lord, one of the modern era games at least. But Nobuo Uematsu also got to start with us working with Square as well.
If you guys don't know who that is, he is the man responsible for pretty much every song you will hear throughout this review, from the original Final Fantasy to Final Fantasy X, and then
Back for 12.
Back for 12?
He came back for 12 before.
I thought he didn't do 12 and then started 13. Okay. Then yeah, he came back for 12 after a good hiatus, after a stint with the Black Mages for a while. And then he did the music for Final Fantasy 13 as well. So yeah, every game in that series has had his name attached to it. You can hear a single song in that game that he did not write. Except for maybe 1 or 2 scores that didn't really matter.
But
we don't care about those.
But the big achievement in the first game is that he was limited to like,
8-bit.
well, just very few notes. Like, I think 8.
It's an 8-bit part, something like that.
Yeah, like 8 or 16 notes. I don't remember which. But yeah, and he made some of the most iconic songs for the series on just that.
Yeah, you can hear it. What we just played earlier, that classic little,
The prelude, which would forever carry on throughout the series.
I believe the only game to not use that is that which will not be spoken of in this review other than right now Final Fantasy X2.
Oh, come on.
From
that
what
one
the
that we
heck?
spoke of.
Cool, we can talk about it.
Indeed.
I hated that one.
Me too,
That's
but not the point. God.
So
So it
yeah,
had almost 500,000 copies, and it was enough to keep Square stores open. So production began on
Story.
the
Final
sequel.
Fantasy 2.
You'll want to find
Ah,
First release Release dates. December 18th of 1987, just in time for the Christmas rush. The kids everywhere enjoyed it. Final Fantasy II release date. 1 day short of the 1 year anniversary from the release of Final Fantasy I.
Back when they actually had a Final Fantasy about once a year.
It makes more sense.
But where 2 was, where 1 was more for a story focus with very little characterization, the second game focused more on characters. Fiora, Guy, whatever the...
Fiora, Guy, Leon, and what was the girl's name?
I don't know. I wanted to say Maria.
Maria, yes.
Probably. But either way, you can rename them as whatever you want.
Yeah, but what's fun in that?
Just get over it.
Yeah.
I can't actually find the opening thing which I was looking for the whole time.
It's the same thing as Final Fantasy
1, 2, and 3 all had
The first,
they're just
actually, in the second game, it does show you the Emperor taking over some of the cities.
Yeah. But that one was more character focused, about 4 orphans who lost their parents in the war and then joined the opposition of the Empire in order to end the war and find their friend Leon.
Yeah, well, not just friend Leon, Maria's older brother Leon. Actually.
Yes. It's always good.
I apologize, I'm not got that far too. I lost an hour and a half worth of rage quit, haven't quite gotten back to playing it yet, so.
Fair enough.
Have to pass that one off to you, Eric.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Different. Want to start with the leveling system or a little bit?
Start with the leveling system. The leveling system was different between the first game and second game because the second game didn't have any set classes. Since you basically got whatever weapon you equipped it, when you used it, it increased. So if you use the same weapon over and over again, it just gets better and better. So choose a weapon, stick with it, you're good. Same goes for magic. Keep casting it, it goes up. The downside is, if you just do a lot of random battles early in the game, you can break your characters and have no problem with it.
But how much of that do you actually have to do before it becomes broken? Is it worth even?
I've never done it, but the hardcore gamers will do anything.
Of course. I mean, if you could do a level 50, no class change, starter equipment, you could.
Exactly. But that's not the point. The story wasn't completely just a very simple one. They made it more complex. Instead of having only 4 people in the party, the 4th person normally walked out. Quite often, that character even died. So sometimes you got really attached to these characters and they died in some pretty good ways, actually.
It's different from the other situations where you're just going around, like River City Ransom. You're going around and just beating guys to death.
Well, those are supposedly your enemies. This is someone who's in your party, which you learn the backstory about, you battle with them, and then flat out dead.
To back up what Eric's thought there, the example of Joseph, the blacksmith in one of the towns, I believe was Salmon.
Yes, Salmon.
He leaves behind a wife and daughter in one of the towns, only to be crushed by a giant boulder in one of the mines.
To save the party.
Yes. So you see this man with family back home, sacrificing himself for 4 strangers he doesn't really know. 3 strangers he doesn't really know. He was your 4th.
Yep.
But they did a lot more actual character development here. You'll see that from this point forward.
Yes. You see the characters sad, afraid, angry. They show emotion from how they're written, which is something that was really well done.
1988.
Graphics-wise, it was 8-bit.
You don't need so much still.
Yeah,
in a year.
nothing special, but it worked for the time, and can't argue against it too much.
And of course, 1 and 2 have been remade
Multiple
times now.
not only made it easier, but
Dawn of Souls on the Game Boy Advance, I think, actually.
yeah, Game Boy Advance.
Fantasy Origin.
That's
Yes, that's.
I enjoyed the Dawn of
Souls.
Yeah, Dawn of Souls was what I enjoyed. But anyways, plenty of characters, people died left and right. Oh yes, yeah.
Wasn't there something else that did different too?
Well, we went over the revenue system.
Wasn't there kind of password system actually?
Yes, password system. Every once in a while you would find certain words which you could use, and when you ask individuals, they could give you information to increase your speed up your quest and put you in the right direction. Granted, it was limited to how many people you could ask, and it's fairly obvious what question, what words you ask people about.
And then, of course, there was the occasional one where there was the one simple word that was just, if all else fails, use this one.
Yeah.
In this game, it was the Rebellion's passphrase of Wild Rose.
Yes.
I don't know, I can't remember specifically why, but
I think it had to do with that, the rebellion, the loyalty rebellion, leading the rebellion. I think it was their symbol.
so you get that, and pretty much anytime you had to do something dealing with the rebellion,
You just use that.
Wild Rose would appear. If for any reason somebody refused to help you, the term Wild Rose would appear in your little list.
Not always. Sid never did.
That's another thing we have to mention here.
Yes, Sid.
Two of the most notable characters in the series make their appearance in this game. Sid,
Sid High.
the airship pilot, he wasn't Highwind.
Yes, but
And most notable as Sid Highwind, Sid Reigns, Headmaster
Will
Sid.
make its first appearance in this game, and will be carried on in every main series game, I believe, up to date.
And
Yes.
big shocker, in this game he plays an airship pilot.
does it?
Moving on.
What was the second one?
The
Second,
Chocobo made its first appearance.
Oh, the Chocobo. Yes.
A lovable mammal.
technically it was kind of useless in this game. It was just
Oh
kind
no,
of
it
cute.
wasn't. It got you long distances without having to go through random battles.
But there was only one technical course that I knew of.
There was only one, but that's really all you needed.
Touche.
You just fly to the shrine right in front of it, walk down, get on the tugboat, run wherever you need to go.
And then we run back to the ship.
Now, once you get off the tugboat, you lose it. So,
Then you have to walk back.
yeah, that's the only downside. But nothing too big of a worry.
And by that point, if you have the airship, you should show them.
Yes.
Such a classic thing.
And,
Oh, yes.
All right.
so yeah.
Thanks.
Moving on from that.
So